Here's an in-depth overview of your draft strategy for the early, middle, and late rounds in 2024. Now, this will be for a redraft league where you're starting one quarterback, two running backs, 2 to 3 wide receivers, 1 to 2 flex spots, a tight end, a kicker, and a defense. We're going to cover everything here and give you a mock draft at the very end of the video to show you how to put it all together. Now, I know we just want to start off with the early rounds, and trust me, it would be exciting, and it is exciting to talk about those options, but our early round draft strategy should actually be dictated based off the values that you're going to find in the middle rounds. Because while I want to sit here and I want to go, oh my gosh, I love Jamar Chase. Oh, I love Justin Jefferson. To try to figure out if you should be drafting one of those wide receivers versus Brees or Bijan, really it's going to come down to the positions that you want to be drafting in rounds 5, 6, 7. Now, personally, I've been drafting a lot of best ball teams this offseason, and the running back values are beautiful in the middle rounds. However, as I built out our consensus 2024 ADP cheat sheet, what I actually found was if you're drafting on Yahoo, if you're drafting on ESPN, if you're drafting on Sleeper, that's not necessarily the case. Now, I put out this updated draft cheat sheet as of August 8th. Everything here's updated both with my own fantasy football rankings as well as ADP for Underdog, Sleeper, Yahoo, ESPN, everything combined into one. Once you got to rounds 4, 5, 6, 7, and I was cross-referencing the ADP that you have from your redraft platforms versus my ranking specifically, what I personally found were wide receivers were beautiful values in the middle rounds. You're able to get guys like Malik Neighbors in round 6 in your redraft league. You're able to get Tank Dell in round 5. You're able to get Zay Flowers in round 6, where I personally have them all ranked pretty much around before their ADP. So I want to put myself in a position where we are able to just slam wide receivers in the middle rounds. However, the issue that you are going to find is specifically when you're playing in your redraft league where you can only start, say, 3 wide receivers, 4 wide receivers at the very most, you're unable to take those wide receivers in the middle rounds if you decided to go with the wide receivers early. So specifically for your formats where you're only starting 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, or you're only starting 2 wide receivers, 2 flex, what I recommend specifically in the early rounds would actually to be go out of your way and grab a couple elite level running backs or grab an elite quarterback and an elite tight end. Now, this is specifically going to be rounds about 1 through 3. Now, of course, I want to put a big time asterisk on this, where we already discussed this in a video a few days ago, where if you're looking at a league that starts 1 flex spot versus 2 flex spots, the 1 flex spot league is actually going to have a very high percentage of the starting lineup output from a week-to-week perspective coming from quarterback as well as tight end, where the more flex spots that you add on, the more you're actually going to see that quarterback and tight end are going to be devalued from an overall percentage of your lineup perspective. So if you're playing in that league where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, in the early rounds, what I would love to do is grab an anchor running back in round 1 and then follow it up with an elite quarterback at the 2-3 turn. Now, in terms of your round 1 running back options, the names you should be looking at will be Christian McCaffrey, obviously RB1 for the time being. This is going to be someone that you would look to take inside the first 3 picks. There's just no way McCaffrey makes it further than there. And then the other running backs in round 1, if you are in the middle picks, I personally am going to be targeting one of Brees or Bijan Robinson. Now, I personally have Brees and Bijan in my own rankings, ranked at 4 and 5 this next season. However, if you look at their ADPs at the moment, if you're drafting on Sleeper, you can get Brees Hall as late as pick 9, where his ADP is. You can get Bijan Robinson on ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper, anywhere from picks 5 or 6. So if you're in the mid-range of round 1, I'm going to prefer to go with Bijan or Brees. And if you're at the very end of round 1, the guy that I will personally be targeting for a full PPR format will be Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, I do want to put some asterisks on this, right? Just because we're saying in general, we're going to be targeting our running back in round 1 that has that crazy ceiling, it doesn't mean that you need to go running back no matter what. If you're going to be at pick 2, for instance, and Christian McCaffrey goes off the board at 1, I do personally have CeeDee Lamb ranked ahead of Brees Hall. I do personally have Lamb ranked ahead of Bijan Robinson. So we're still trying to optimize for best player available, but this is why I give you all our rankings in the form of tiers. That way you can understand, oh, okay, if I'm within this tier, tier, this is the draft strategy that I want to be going with, but I'm not going to be moving players up or down tiers just to try to fit a particular strategy. Now, moving on to round 2 at running back, if you didn't go with the running back in round 1 and instead say you ended up getting Justin Jefferson at pick 8, then at the beginning of round 2, the running backs that I personally would be looking at would be Saquon Barkley or Jonathan Taylor. Now, there are a couple different options once you get later on. I think Kyren, Achane, those are two guys that are going to be wildly dependent on the format that you're drafting in. Where right now, if you actually look at Kyren Williams, he is one of my most drafted running backs when I've been doing a lot of drafts on Underdog because he goes in the middle of round 3. But in your regular redraft league, you're just simply not going to be able to get that price point on him. And if you're drafting on ESPN, you're going to have to take him at pick 15. If you're on Yahoo Sleeper, you're going to have to take him at 16. But what's very interesting is if you actually compare this to Devon Achane instead, Achane's a running back that goes cheaper in your regular redraft leagues than what you're going to see specifically in best ball. Achane on Underdog goes at about pick 22, but you can get him in the middle around 3 if you are drafting on ESPN. So obviously, use this ADP draft cheat sheet. Try to understand the platform that you're drafting on and where those pockets are going to be for valuable players for you. But last but not least, let's look at quarterback. Let's look at tight end. I do think starting at the very end of the second round to the very beginning of the third round, that's when you can consider the true elite level quarterbacks such as Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Once you get to the middle to the end of round 3, I think that's when you can begin to look at like Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, especially if you could go with the elite quarterback and then follow it up with the tight end immediately after, whether that's taking Lamar and then Mark Andrews or Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Now, transitioning over to the middle rounds, hopefully by the time we get to rounds 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you've already put yourself in a position where we have an elite running back, we have an elite quarterback, we have possibly an elite tight end. Of course, only if one fell to us. We're not going to be reaching dramatically just to try to fit a particular draft strategy. We still kind of want to be going best player available. But when we're in these middle rounds, what is so different than the drafts that you've been seeing me do on the live streams is, say if I'm doing a stream and we're drafting on Underdog, if I want to take Devonta Smith, I have to take him at the very end of the second round or the very beginning of the third round. However, depending on the platform that you're on, you can actually get a wide receiver like Devonta Smith instead at the end of the 4th round, at the beginning of the 5th round. Right now, if you're looking at his ADP on ESPN, on Sleeper, he has an ADP of 45, putting him at the end of the 4th and being able to just slam wide receivers with that profile, go like Devonta Smith in round 4, Zay Flowers in round 5. You can go 3-4 rounds straight, taking these wide receivers that have a nice floor ceiling combo and putting yourself vastly ahead of your other league mates who instead are kind of stuck taking these running backs that have uncertain floors, but just project to see opportunity in bad offenses. Like an example is, if we're going to look at Devonta Smith on ESPN, he has an ADP of 45. And if we try to look at some other running backs, say if you wanted to go Joe Mixon, you have to take Joe Mixon at 34. Joe Mixon's going in round 3, whereas you're getting Smith at the very end of round 4. Whereas if you're looking at Underdog, Smith goes at the beginning of round 3, Joe Mixon goes in freaking round 6. So please don't apply this to Underdog drafts. Those will be a little bit different. And of course, you can see my Underdog draft strategy where we're drafting every single day on this live stream. I mean, it is my favorite place to draft. Their best ball drafts and no time commitment at all during the season. It's how I draft hundreds of teams every year. It's how I won $150,000 on Underdog 2 years ago. And of course, if you want to join that draft with us, you can find the link in the description, in the comment section, in the live chat. They're actually hosting Flock tournaments every Monday and Thursday night until the season starts, which I'm really excited about. But if you use code FLOCK when you sign up, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. You'll get my updated 2024 fantasy football draft guide every Sunday until the season kicks off, my updated rankings every Sunday until the season kicks off, and you'll get that 2024 ADP consensus cheat sheet that we're just going through everything with this video, trying to come up with your draft strategy. But as we transition through the middle rounds, what we're hoping for at this point is you have an elite running back or two, you have your top end quarterback, you have your top end tight end, and then we filled out those really nice wide receiver values in the middle rounds of your draft. And as we approach the later rounds, this is when we begin to transition our mindset. Rather than thinking about, oh, okay, we need to just hunt values, what we need to be hunting for in the later rounds is upside, upside, upside. Because a big thing that you are going to have here is the understanding that these players may get cut and may get sent to the waiver wire. I am pretty confident outside of injury, Whoever you take in the top 5 rounds of your draft this year, you're not cutting them. You're not sending them to waivers. They are going to be on your roster through the entire season, or you are going to trade them. But once we begin to get to rounds like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, this is about the range where what we need to be looking for are profiles that are going to give us clarity at the beginning of the season. I know we just hear upside and right away you think, oh, that's like a rookie, right? I should go ahead and I should take Adonai Mitchell here in the 11th round of my redraft league. And I'm not saying that Mitchell doesn't have upside, but the issue that you're going to find when you go through and you take a bunch of rookie wide receivers at the end of your draft, I'm not talking about Rome Odunze, I'm not talking about Xavier Worthy, I'm not talking about these round 1 NFL draft picks that should have roles right away. I'm talking about like the Adonai Mitchells of the world. I'm talking about the Roman Wilsons of the world. Is you may take them at the end of your draft expecting, oh, they could have a lot of upside in the long term. They're not really going to do anything in the short term. But then we get to week 3, there's an interesting waiver wire pickup, and you go, oh, I'm kind of interested in that guy. And you look down at your bench and go, okay, I can't cut Adonai Mitchell. I like his long-term upside. I can't cut Roman Wilson. I like his long-term upside, even though they showed you nothing at the beginning of the season, but you kind of understood that they won it. So what I personally prefer to do in the later rounds of our drafts is I'm personally going to prefer to opt to go with players that are going to be very clear with what their roles are at the beginning of the season. A perfect example of this is instead of going and taking Adonai Mitchell, instead, if you pivot over and you take someone like J.K. Dobbins is a great example of a running back that you will know right when the season starts if he is worth rostering or not. Hypothetically, we get to the start of the year after you took J.K. Dobbins on August 15th, and Dobbins is playing well behind Gus Edwards, where J.K. Dobbins doesn't look like the same player he once was. At that point, it's like, oh, okay. I think this guy can be the next Kyren Williams coming off the waiver wire in week 2. Let me throw J.K. Dobbins back on the waiver wire, and I'll pick up this new hot hand. But you're able to do that because you get the clarity with that player's situation early in the season, and you kind of understand there's a binary range of outcomes. They're going to hit early on, or you can send them the waiver wire because there are really only 2 paths that can go. Whereas with someone like Adonai Mitchell, it's like, oh, I picked him up, but I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know anything at the beginning of the season. I mean, just a couple other examples of that. I know this is someone that's not really getting drafted very often anymore, but Kondre Miller's another great example of that, where a running back that some people thought was going to have a role in New Orleans this next year, he goes out in training camp, the coaching staff comes and says, oh yeah, another hamstring injury. We may have to cut this dude if he can't stay healthy. And then all of a sudden, nobody is interested in it all. But I think that's a perfect example of a player that you can take at the very end of your draft and go, oh, okay, well, I already have my top end running backs that I grab. I already have an elite quarterback. I have a top end tight end. I slam wide receiver values in the middle rounds. I'm just hunting upside at the end, and I'm going to work the waiver wire at the beginning of the season. Now, talking about kicker defense strategy, just real quick, if you're in a league where people are taking defenses in the middle rounds, where you see someone take the Niners defense in round 8, you are better off streaming. Wait till the last round. You'll get your defense then. Pick up one that you like the week 1 matchup for and stream the position. However, if you're in a league where nobody cares about defense and you actually find yourself where you only have 3 rounds left in your draft and nobody's taken a defense yet, that's a position where those final 3-4 rounds in your draft, those are going to be guys you probably cut anyway. So it actually can make sense for you at the end of your draft to reach a little bit compared to the rest of your league mates to get that elite level defense. It's just very hard for me to say that, of course, because I know some of y'all will be in Yahoo leagues where a taco goes through and they tank the Dallas defense in round 9. And there you just want to stream. And personally, I just stream kickers. I think it's so difficult to project kickers out other than Justin Tucker, Hook 'em Lawrence. So I think you just wait the last round no matter what to take your kicker. And then quarterback, tight end, backup strategies. Obviously, this is going to depend on how many teams are in your league as well as how many bench spots you have. But the benefit that you get from taking that elite level quarterback like Josh Allen is you are not going to have to roster another backup QB. And instead, you can use that extra roster spot to go through, hide away as many upside running backs as you can down there, hide away as many upside wide receivers as you can down there. And same thing with an elite level tight end. If you get Sam Laporta, you don't need to roster a backup tight end unless, of course, you have very deep benches or it's a very deep league overall. Then you understandably can go out there and grab someone like Luke Musgrave as your tight end too. But I want to go through, I want to give you a mock draft just kind of illustrating exactly what you should be doing and how you can put every one of these practices into play. We're going to go ahead and get this started. We are in at pick 4. We're going to use our ADP consensus cheat sheet to try to identify the best values that are on the board every single time. Now, I am also going to be using my rankings for this, but nonetheless, let me give you our thought process behind every one of these individual picks and with where we are going at the moment. Now, you notice that if you're looking at the ADP for the platform that we're using right now, Breece Hall's actually all the way down at 9. However, if you look at our 2024 ADP consensus cheat sheet, you'll see that for a regular redraft league, Breece Hall, in my mind, especially with my rankings as well, should actually be pick 4 because we are going to identify phenomenal wide receiver values that we are going to get in the middle rounds. Now, using our ADP consensus cheat sheet, it is telling us that Drake London currently is the best value on the board. However, because this is only a league where we start 2 wide receivers in a singular flex, as we discussed previously, here I'm going to be incentivized to instead actually go ahead, get an elite quarterback and an elite tight end. So I personally am going to go ahead and actually reach on Josh Allen here at the 209, just because I expect, like we talked about previously, we should see phenomenal wide receiver values in the middle rounds. Now, there are a few interesting things we can talk about here. One, you do have some running back values that are falling, and this comes down to what you personally believe with your own rankings versus where ADP value lies. Because if you look at across all platforms right here, Derrick Henry is the selection you should be taking at the 304. But personally, I actually have Josh Jacobs ranked ahead of Derrick Henry. So I'm going to make a pick that I know most people aren't going to agree with. Now, I completely understand, actually, I'll do what y'all want. We'll go ahead. We'll take Derrick Henry here. I'm going to draft 1,000 teams. I do want to let you know, I have a little bit of a hot take that I think Jacobs outscores Henry, but that's for another video. Now, looking at what we discussed previously, we actually have a ton of different options here at wide receiver for these depth guys in the middle rounds. I still actually like the idea of getting an elite tight end because this is a league where we're going to start 2 wide receivers in 1 flex. But the teams on the other side of us already took Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, so they can't take tight end. So we're going to be guaranteed to get back either Mark Andrews or Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid would stack with Josh Allen for us. So we're going to take our first wide receiver, in my mind, at a massive value. And at a value, if you look at the ADP consensus, we're going to get Devonta Smith at the 409. So just as we were expecting, we do get the elite tight end Dalton Kincaid making it back to us in the 5th round. This makes a lot of sense because it's a league where we only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. I still believe there should be great wide receivers available to us in round 6, 7, 8. That's what we're planning on doing in the middle rounds. But let's get our elite tight end. He also correlates with Josh Allen, so we can kind of double down on this Buffalo Bills offense. And it's great value here at the 504. Now, here come the middle round wide receiver values that we are expecting. So if you look at the guys that are best available at the moment, you have Keenan Allen, Jordan Addison, Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice. You have a lot of changes in the rankings right now. Right now, the best player, according to the consensus ADP, is going to be Keenan Allen here. I think you have some higher upside options that we may get on the way back around, but those aren't going to be guys we consider ourselves with at the 609 because they can make it to us at the 704. Now, if you look at Sleeper at the moment, it is telling us that Jordan Addison's the best wide receiver available. However, if you actually cross-reference this with what you have with the consensus ADP cheat sheet, you will see that Calvin Ridley is actually the best wide receiver available right now due to the DeAndre Hopkins injury, vaulting him ahead of these other guys. So by the time we're back up on the clock, we've kind of caught up on wide receiver, but as we discussed previously, typically receiver is going to be the range that you're wanting to look at here. Hollywood Brown, according to the ADP consensus cheat sheet, is currently the highest ranked wide receiver out of this grouping. I'm actually not the biggest Hollywood fan, but I will say you're just getting him at such a decent price here at the end of the 8th round. And if we're comparing him to some of the running backs that we could get, I think the running backs will make it back around to us in the 9th if you look at the ADP consensus cheat sheet. So we'll continue to catch back up at wide receiver. I do stand by Hollywood is my least favorite wide receiver out of this Chiefs room, which is why when I'm drafting on Underdog, I never take him because he's the first guy off the board. But here we're actually getting almost 2 rounds after Rashee Rice, and we're getting him almost 3 rounds after Xavier Worthy. So if you weren't looking at any rankings or any cheat sheets, you will see that the best running backs available are Chubb, Eckler. In reality, the running back that you should more likely than not be taking in this range is actually going to be Brian Robinson. We're going to go ahead and pull the trigger on him as our running back 3. And if you look at how well-rounded our roster is at this point, we have the elite quarterback with Josh Allen. We have the elite tight end with Dalton Kincaid. We have that stack. We also have more than enough running back production with Breece Hall, Derrick Henry, and Brian Robinson. And we have wide receiver depth filled out through the middle rounds where they are at the strongest value with Devonta Smith, Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley, as well as Hollywood Brown. So if you didn't get the elite quarterback or the elite tight end, this would be about the point where you'd maybe begin thinking about your second quarterback or second tight end. However, because we paid the premium at the beginning of this draft, we do just get to roster as many running backs and wide receivers that we want here. So looking at the best running backs available, Ezekiel Elliott's at 110 with the ADP consensus cheat sheet, but bad news came out about Zeke as of late. So it's difficult to know if you still want to be taking Ezekiel Elliott here. Going over to wide receiver, however, there just simply aren't too many high upside plays. So I think you could take Ezekiel Elliott in this range and then honestly look for Dowdle on the way back around. I know Dowdle's had the positive news, but if you look at the way that ADP is set up on this platform right here in particular, he actually doesn't have an ADP until 148. So you could put yourself in a position where you take both Dallas backs at the end of the 10th and the beginning of the 11th, lock up all the Cowboys running back touches at an extremely cheap cost. So just as we are expecting, we are going to get Dowdle making it to us. Now, I know it seems like we've rostered a ton of running backs in comparison to what we have at wide receiver. And this is something that's very specific to the league settings that we're drafting for, right? Going back to this is a league where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So you can only get 3 wide receivers in there at the very most. The receivers that we've taken, I'm very comfortable projecting out target shares this next year. So in these later rounds, what I'm primarily looking for is I'm looking to chase ceiling. So what we're going to be looking here for wide receivers at the bottom end of the draft is we're trying to take guys that have wide ranges of outcomes that if they hit early, they could hit in a big time way. But if they turn out to be bums, then honestly, we don't need to worry about it. If we're going to look at the current cost of these guys, Shaheed is 120 ADP consensus. Judy is 132. Downs just got injured. Downs will not be a reliable source here. So I think honestly what we may end up doing is taking Shaheed, where it's nice to know if Shaheed's not the wide receiver 2 in New Orleans week 1, you just immediately go out there, cut him, have absolutely no hesitation with it, because really we should get the clarity at the beginning of the season. And it's not like we're going to be sitting around because this is a year 1 guy that we're going, oh, okay, he just needs some time. It's like, no, okay, if he's playing 80% of the snaps, cool, we can keep him. However, if he is more so being used at a rotation, then we're going to get rid of him. Now we are approaching the last 3 rounds, and this is about where you should begin to think about, do I want to get an elite defense or do I want to just stream the defensive position every single week? Now, in some of the drafts that you're in, if you're in a draft on Yahoo, on ESPN with your high school buddies, you're going to see that, oh, okay, and maybe they take a defense there in round 7. Maybe they take a defense in round 8. And if that's the league that you are in, 100% you should be streaming the position. However, when you're looking at the very bottom end where your last 3 rounds in your draft, the reality of the situation is these guys are going to continuously be churned off your roster, where you're going to be cutting them. You're going to be picking up different players off the waiver wire, where I would recommend if you can get one of the true elite level defenses within the last few rounds of your draft, that it honestly is kind of worth it if we're considering cutting the majority of these players anyway, to go out there and take that top defense. So we're going to do just that. We are going to take the San Francisco 49ers here in the 13th round, because then we really only have one other player that we're going to take other than the kicker. And the kicker should be in the very last round of every single draft. Okay, we are back on the clock here, and kicker is really going to be our play in the 15th. I think it's so difficult to predict these guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these wide receivers that I think may actually start on the IR. And if you take Josh Downs at the end of your draft and he starts on the PUP and we can move him to our IR slot, that's going to allow us to pick up another player immediately off the waiver wire as soon as this draft ends and we move him over to the IR. Now we're on the clock. Last round. We're just going to go ahead. We can take a kicker in Jake Elliott. What you're also able to do, if there's somebody that you really like here, say hypothetically you love Gabe Davis or hypothetically you love DeMario Douglas, you can go ahead, you can take him and then just cut him week 1 when you actually need to start your kicker. But we're just going to go ahead. I think Jake Elliott's a fine option, so we will take him here in the 15th. But let me kind of recap what we did here just for 1 second. And then if you go through, if you look at this squad, I mean, we have the elite running backs at the very top. We have running backs with upside and depth pieces below. We got our middle round wide receiver values. We got an elite quarterback and an elite tight end, so we only have to roster one of each. And we could focus in on high upside wide receivers and running backs later in the draft. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. I want to remind you, coming up on the Flock Meetup, August 22nd. If you're close to Austin, Texas, you better be there. Grab a ticket at flockfantasy.store. Should be a ton of fun. And also, if you wanted to get in a draft with us, we're still streaming every single night till the season starts. We're going to be doing Underdog Fantasy drafts, best ball, no time commitment all during the year. So it's extra added fun on top of your main league, not replacing the main fantasy draft that you care most about. But yeah, if you use code FLOCK, you're going to get my 2024 Fantasy Football Draft Guide, 2024 Fantasy Football Rankings, and 2024 ADP Draft Cheat Sheet updated every single week till the season starts. And also with code FLOCK, you'll get a Christian McCaffrey special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard, 50% deposit bonus up to $250. And yeah, you can hop in some Flock drafts with us. But I think that's all I got for you. Really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day. And really hope I get to draft with you in the live stream later tonight.